What's going on there, YouTube? And welcome to Fresh Comic Stories. Guys, this is the channel where we basically sit down and cover different kinds of comic book stories. Now, guys, today we are going to jump back over to DC Comics and we are going to pick up with Before Watchmen Rorschach. Now, the reason why we are going to sit down and cover this storyline is because last week we covered Before Watchmen Night Owl, and you guys really did like that stuff right there. And so I felt like we should continue on with the Before Watchmen stuff, and we're going to sit down and cover Rorschach today. Now, guys, remember, when it comes to Before Watchmen, they were basically a bunch of different miniseries that came out that told stories about each character in the Watchmen universe before the actual Watchmen event. Now, we covered Night Owl last week, so like I said, this week we are going to cover Rorschach. So guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe for more comic book stories in the near future. But let's dive into Before Watchmen Rorschach. I hope you enjoy. Now, before we dive into this story, I just want to say how amazing this story is. But the artwork is so beautiful as well. To me, this is a decent story, but we pick up with someone basically leaving some kind of message on a dead woman's body. Now, this is something we are going to see over and over throughout the whole story, but this body we are seeing right now is only in 2 pages. But this is DC trying to tell us that this could be something important and we need to keep this on the back of our minds. But the body does get left behind for the public to find and see the body with all the messages on the body. Now, we finally do pick up with Rorschach, and you have him tell us about the city, about the life he is living, and the next case he is trying to take care of. We learned that his mother was living a life in prostitution, but also we learned that he lives alone with no friends and family around him. But right now he is trying to find the one guy who can lead him to the one thing he is looking for. Now, the man he is chasing after could lead him to a hidden stash of drugs that are hidden somewhere in the city. And so, of course, you have Rorschach just tortured the man to the point where you have the man finally give up the location of the stash of drugs that are hidden. Now, something else to point out is that when it comes to Rorschach, remember, he is not afraid to kill someone. He is not afraid to cross that line, unlike Night Owl and other heroes. Rorschach will cross that line if he has to kill somebody. Now we jump over to Rorschach walking in the sewers because the man from earlier told him that the big stash of drugs is hidden in the sewers. And so you have Rorschach keep looking until he is able to find the drugs. And of course, he does find the drugs after looking for a while. He finds a bunch of guys guarding the door, and he takes them out very quickly. But here's the big thing about this moment. When Rorschach goes to open up the door to the hidden stash, he gets jumped by a bunch of men and gets taken out. And this makes sense because you're talking about someone who was really not trained to fight. Also, you have to throw in the account that he has no powers as well. And so him being taken out by a high number of guys, to me, makes sense. But guys, we also get the introduction to a character named Rawhead, but also going by the name Crime. Now, honestly, both names suck, but we have to pick and choose, and we're going to call him Rawhead. But you have Rawhead and his men keep beating down on Rorschach to the point that Rorschach is unable to move, and he is now laying in the sewers in his own puddle of blood. And you have Rawhead and his man just leave him there thinking that they just killed off a superhero. We then get another 2-page setting where the body of the woman earlier we saw who was killed, but a message was written in her body was found. This is where we learn that this is not the first woman to be killed. We also learn that the killer has been named the Bard, and he has been going around killing women all over the city and leaving their bodies somewhere to be found as a message to the world in a sick kind of way. But we jump forward to the next morning and we pick up with the character Rorschach once again. This time though, he is walking into a diner after being beaten up last night by Rawhead. But he walks into this diner and the people there know him so well, which means he is a regular there. But they see his face is badly bruised. Now, the lady who is serving his food, he does start to build a bond with her. And they tell him that the Bard has killed again. But then they said that he looks like crap. But he then says that he is alive. And they should have made sure they killed him off, because now he is going to find Rawhead and bring him down. Now we pick up with Rorschach leaving the diner, but he does see 2 men that he knows works for Rawhead. And so what he does is really messed up. He takes a truck and slams one of the guys into a building with the truck, which now that guy is stuck underneath the truck and he is screaming for help, like he is trying to ask his partner to get him out of this mess. But his friend is in shock right now, because what he is seeing right now, he knows it's a message from Rorschach. Plus a piece of paper does fly down to tell him that he did not die in the sewers, that he will come back and get Rawhead and also all of his men. To make sure the other guy who was not hit by the truck understands, you have Rorschach light the truck on fire, which does kill the man who was barely alive and stuck underneath the truck. This is Rorschach kind of saying, hey, he might kill every single member. Now we pick up with the man who survived Rorschach's attack, and he runs over to tell Rawhead that they did not kill Rorschach. Remember that they just beat the man down and left his body in the sewers, but assumed that he was so badly beaten to the point he would not be able to move and just die down there. And so now with word out that he is not dead, you have Rawhead kill off the man who came to warn him about Rorschach and tell the rest of his men that they will come up with a plan to basically kill Rorschach off for sure this time. We now jump back over to Rorschach walking into the same diner we saw him go into earlier, but this time his injuries have gotten worse because he really never had properly taken care of those wounds. And so his body is screaming for some kind of medical help. But of course, he does ignore it. Now, you have the lady at the diner take care of him again and tries to give him something to eat. Also, try to tell him that he needs to go to the hospital because those wounds are not looking so good. Now, we don't know her name still just yet, but we are going to learn her name very soon. But when Rorschach spits up a high amount of blood and then he passes out, that was a sign for the people at the diner to take this man to the hospital to get some kind of help. And with him being in the hospital, he was there for about 3 days. And then he leaves without anybody seeing him. But now his wounds are somewhat taken care for and still needs some proper care. But he's in a hurry to go after Rawhead. Now we pick up with Rorschach and of course him being a hero once again. But this time he's trying to find Rawhead. And so what he does is that he goes after a man who can just give up the location of Rawhead. It is literally him doing the same thing he did to the guy in the beginning of the story. He just tortures the man for information on where in the world is Rawhead. Now, the big problem is that Rorschach does not know that some men of Rawhead is coming to help the guy Rorschach is torturing right now. Now, with the third chapter of this story, we pick up with Rorschach trying to get away from the men who work with Rawhead. Now, most of these pages is literally him trying to get away from them. There is no significant thing here except this man is probably making his past wounds reopen again, but that is it. Now, to make sure he does get away, he does get into a taxi and pays for the taxi to just drive off somewhere, hoping to lose the men who were after him. Now, this taxi driver tries to have a conversation with Rorschach, but of course, he is not in the mood to have a conversation at this moment, since he is being hunted down by a bunch of men, and he is trying to make sure everything is all good. Now we jump over to the same diner that Rorschach has been going to throughout this whole story, which this is the point where we learn the young lady who works there name finally. We learn that her name is Nancy, and the reason why we learn her name is because you have Rorschach go back in there to ask her out on a date. Because this woman, Nancy, has been taking care of him throughout the last couple chapters. And so he felt like it's the right thing to do, to take her out, to be with somebody, and possibly build up a relationship. But the thing is, you have a cook say her name out loud, saying her name is Nancy. Now, at first, it does seem like she's going to say no, but then she changes her mind and says, no, I'm going to say yes. Let's go on a date. Pick me up here and I'll see you at 11 o'clock tonight. Now, you do have Rorschach kind of watch the streets. He looks out for any kind of clue that could help him to find Rawhead, because that's still his main goal in this story, to bring down Rawhead. Now, while he is waiting for Rawhead, what he does see a bunch of men that he knows that works for Rawhead. And so he starts to follow the men around, hoping that one of these guys will finally give him some kind of clue on where he can find Rawhead. Now, while he is walking around in the streets, of course, he finally sees Rawhead, and he knows that Rawhead is doing this on purpose, because in the past, Rawhead was never seen in public. He was always in one of his clubs, but now he's out in the open, hoping to have Rorschach follow him to have their final battle. But the thing is, while Rorschach is trying to follow Rawhead to his home base, that is when you have a city-wide blackout. The whole city goes dark, and you have Rorschach say, bam, this is the perfect time for me to bring him down. Now, to close the third chapter of this story, you have Rorschach go into the base of Rawhead and start to fight all of his men. At first, you have Rorschach actually winning the battle against the men of Rawhead, but here's the lovely big problem. He is not watching his back like he should, because you have one of Rawhead men about to knock out Rorschach from behind. But to close the chapter, you have the story jump over to Nancy, the young lady from the diner, and we see her waiting for Rorschach because they were supposed to go out on a date tonight. But of course, he is not going to show up now. But out of nowhere, you have a random man appear and start to talk to Nancy. Chapter 4 opens up with Rorschach getting his butt kicked by Rawhead men once again. Now, to me, even though I like this story, I feel like Rorschach should be able to handle Rawhead and his men this time. But sadly, he gets his butt kicked once again like he did back in the sewers. He is beaten down to the ground and even unmasked. You have Rawhead put on the mask of Rorschach and basically start to make fun of him and kind of said things like heroes should be better than this. And then he finally knocks out Rorschach and moves on to torturing him in the next room over. Now we jump back over to Nancy once again, and we see her walking throughout the streets with the random man she met earlier. And they are trying to get somewhere safe because with the city having a blackout, you have people going wild and crazy, stealing things from stores. And so with that happening, you have the mysterious man she met earlier take her down an alley as a way to keep her safe. But that is when he reveals that he is basically the Bard, the killer who has been going around killing different women in the city we have been seeing throughout this story. And right now, Nancy is the next target for the Bard. Now, the final few pages kind of jump back and forth between two different settings. After Rorschach was knocked out and unmasked, you have Rawhead make fun of Rorschach because he looks like a nobody, meaning if he dies, no one will care for him at all. But you have Rawhead take the mask of Rorschach and goes out to fight crime. Because again, with the blackout happening, you have people out there going around doing illegal drugs. Now the story does its back and forth between the two settings, with Rorschach about to be tortured but being able to get away and Rawhead being killed by the public. Now the reason why Rawhead is killed by the public is because he is not Rorschach. He is not a fighter who knows how to fight like Rorschach. Even though Rorschach just got his butt kicked, but still, Rawhead is not Rorschach and he dies. Lucky for Rorschach, he finds the body of Rawhead and takes his mask back from the dead body of Rawhead. Now to close the story, you have Rorschach tell us what happened to Nancy, because when we last saw her, she was about to be killed by the killer, the Bard. But we come to find out that she actually survived. And with her surviving, she was able to find some help and tell the police who the killer is. But we come to find out, even though the police arrest the killer, he was able to get away. He went to court, but they all said he was an innocent man. There was not enough proof to say this man is the Bard. And so, of course, in court, he got away and he was said he was innocent. But for Rorschach, he's kind of like, no, this man was not innocent. This man hurt Nancy and other women in the city, which means this man is actually guilty. And you have Rorschach go after the man, the Bard, and that is how the story closes. And so guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe for more comic book stories in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I will see you on the next comic book video. Later, guys.